Okay, the last two concepts that you're going to be planning for your project are lighting and sound. And there are several things that we're going to need to kind of learn and catch up on a little bit before we get started. So just like all of our other concepts and pieces of this project that we've been working on, when we start working with lighting and sound, we have to start with the script. We have to start by thinking about what is important in the script, what do I need to portray, how can I use lighting and sound to support that script, okay? So here are some questions that you can use to guide you when you're starting to think about lighting and sound for your scene and designing lighting and sound for your scene. All right, the first question, what is the setting, the time, and the place? That's going to be important because light changes based on the time of day, right? Naturally speaking. And so we're going to be using our theatrical lighting skills to support that. How can I use lights to portray that setting, that time, and that place? How can I use sound to portray that setting, that time, and that place? All right? What is the mood of the scene? And how can I support that mood with lights and sound? They really do work hand in hand to support mood in a huge way. So, the things that you're going to consider when you are trying to create your lighting and sound pieces are, for light, visibility is super important. Can they be seen or not, right? We have to be able to see the actors in order for the scene to make sense. Focus, what is most important in the scene? Where do I want the audience to look? And mood, what is the overall impact or feeling of the scene? And how can I make that clear or communicate that through lights? For sound, it's a little bit more simple. We're concerned with audibility. Can we hear the actors? What do we hear in that setting, or what's important for us to hear, maybe, right? And then again, mood. Sound has such a huge impact in mood. Think about the scary movies that you see. What is it about those scenes when the killer's creeping up on them that's really, really terrifying? It's the sound. If you turn the sound off in a horror movie, the horror movie is suddenly not so horrifying. All right, so first we're going to do a quick lesson on lighting in general because we didn't really get to cover that this year, okay? So this is not everything that you need to know for lighting, but this is like the most basic stuff that you need to know to get a handle on it and start thinking about it and create a design, all right? Major question that we want to ask ourselves first and foremost, what can I control or change about lighting? Because that's the first step in creating a design, right? Is identifying what I can control and change and what impact those changes have. And if I understand that, then I can make meaningful choices, all right? So there are three major things about lighting that we can control and that we generally think about when we're creating lighting designs. The first one is color. Now, in order to change the color of a light, theatrical lighting techs use something called a gel. These are gels. These are examples of gel papers. We call it a gel paper. It's really more like a piece of soft pliable plastic, and basically what happens is they take one of these pieces of soft pliable plastic, they come in all kinds of colors as you can see, and they stick them in this little black frame right here, right into a frame, and then that frame gets inserted in a special little holder in front of the lighting fixture like this right here. And then when you turn the light on and the light shines through that gel paper, it changes the color of the light that comes out on stage. So one of the main purposes of changing the color of a light is its impact on mood. For example, think about, as we look at these next couple images, how do the differences in color change the mood or feel of the scene? So all of these images are of a stage washed with red light. What does that red feel like? What thoughts or feelings or ideas does that red color bring up? Then stage is washed with blue light. What does that blue bring up that maybe the red didn't? What kind of time or place might be indicated by blue light that wouldn't be indicated by red? And then green. What's different about the green light than the red and the blue? What feelings does the green light create that maybe the blue or the red don't? And what symbols or images can we come up with that are relatable to that? Notice this one's got a little bit of blue mixed in as well. Here are some other examples of gel colors in lights and their impact and what they actually look like on stage. Notice you've got a lot of yellow in here. This is a yellow gel on a light. This one looks like it's a magenta or pink gel. You've got some blue or cyan going on down here. Over here, there's a lot of, this is like that darker blue, and then you've got some purple and pinks coming in. And notice the impact on the actual people or objects on stage, they get lit up and they have some of that color of the light, but it's different when it hits the people and gets diffused on stage. This person doesn't look wholly pink, but they do look lit up in a bright manner. And that light does have impact on them, and impact on the color of their clothing, and impact on the color of their skin and everything. So there are lots of changes that lighting creates that have to be considered carefully when you're designing lighting. There was one more that I wanted to show you on here. Oh, this is a useful one. Red, green, and blue all together and what they look like. So that's what a gel does. So briefly, one last quick example. Just take a look at this scene. It is the same image, but notice here we've got kind of a yellowish warm light. Here we have a cooler blue light. Here we've got a pinkish light. And then here, I'd say it's more of a clear, kind of a cold light, maybe a clear gel. And these are not theatrical lighting designs. They are standard in-home lighting designs, but just notice the impact even there and the difference in mood that is set by those 4 different styles of lighting. That is what you want to be considering when you are thinking about lighting for your scene, the difference that lighting creates in those 4 images. Another controllable element of light that we are going to be considering is the direction that the light is aimed in. So when we change the direction of a light, we talk about focusing or aiming the lighting fixture. Another great way to think about this is to think about if you've ever seen one of those gooseneck lamps, or like for what is that, Pixar, the Pixar movie, they've got that little lamp who jumps around at the beginning of the films, right? The gooseneck lamp, and he looks you in the eye, or it's like he looks you in the eye, right? The gooseneck is this movable neck that those lamps have. And on that gooseneck lamp, you can take this head that has the light shining out of it, and you can aim it in whatever direction you want. You can squish it way down so that it's aimed out like this. You can turn it around and aim it that direction. You can point it straight up. There are all kinds of different directions that that light could be focused or aimed. And the impact is totally different. If you point it straight up, you get a lot of light all over the place, right? If you focus it down on one particular thing, you can block most of the light from going all the other places and focus it specifically on one area. This can be really, really, really useful when you are working with theatrical. So some great examples to demonstrate direction come from DCR Media. Here's the direction here of these lights. You've got these 2 red ones coming in from an angle. Those are aiming way out toward the audience. This one's out toward the audience. And then here in this image, you've got this one aimed way up that direction, this one that direction, down and across. So there's a lot of different focus points or different ideas that can be established using the direction of the light and the aim of the light. It determines what's going to be most visible, what's going to draw our eye and our attention and our focus, and it determines mood as well. The concept we're going to consider when we are working on lighting design is the intensity of the light, and that refers to how intensely focused or how diffused the light appears on stage. So there are 2 concepts we're going to discuss when it comes to intensity. The first one is wash and the other is spot, and they are opposites basically. All right, so with a spot of light, the way you can kind of see the difference between these 2 is a spot is going to produce, it's usually one light, and it's going to produce a specific pool of light that is usually pretty small and very focused on one object or one character on stage. All right, you can do this, achieve this by having a light that goes straight down onto that character on stage called a special, or it might be a light coming from the front that is focused again on one tiny little. You might use a follow spot, which is when there's a light that is manually moved by an individual, a tech individual who follows, as it sounds, right, who follows the character on stage with that one focused light that goes just on them. The difference, the opposite of that basically then, is a wash. And a wash of light is when you have multiple different lights that are aimed and overlap over a general area to create multiple pools of light that then blend together to generally light that whole area of the stage. And of course you can apply colors to that, so you could have a colored wash, you could have a clear wash. Same thing with the spots. I love these examples because they give you some great ideas about what that whole spot versus wash thing is. Here you have all of these individual specials
that are aimed straight down, those are all spot specials, right? They're spotlights. You can see how they create this one singular pool of light, and then there's darkness all around. It is distinct. This one's actually a bit diffused. Each of those looks a bit diffused. This one's maybe a little bit more clear, where those pools of light are pretty sharp, you know, and you can see a very distinct definition between which spot is lit up and which spots are left in darkness. They're very focused, very sharp. Here, I like this, you've got this blue wash, right? So there's a general blue light where there are a bunch of lights that overlap that are blue in color because they've used a blue gel, and they create this you know, overall blue color, but then you've got these individual special lights that are framed to create squares on the floor so that it looks like there's actually a window there, right? Different styles of window. They've used gobos, I guess, to probably create that look as well. And you won't necessarily need to know what a gobo is for this particular work. However, you get the idea. There's this spot light that creates that shape on the floor, and then you have the general blue wash all over put together. I like this one because it shows you a great example of this concept of side lighting. Notice this light that comes straight across that floor. The fixture that's creating that is actually right up here, and it is aimed in at that side angle. It is the light that is lighting up this guy in these little trees right here. It's creating that big ray of light that comes across the stage there, catches a little bit of her, but she's actually lit up by a spot that's coming straight down on her. And then you've got probably some general lighting here to be able to catch that table and stuff, so there are several other lights that are going as well. But some of the two most prominent lights here are this one coming in from the side at that hard angle that is, because of its angle, creates almost a wash across the stage, right? Even though it is a very sharp, very intense, very focused light. And then this one that is sharp and intense and focused straight down on her, creating that pool around the girl. Talk about sound for film or for theater, there are three major concepts that we're going to worry about. They are diegetic sound, non-diegetic sound, and the concept of amplification, or to amplify. Diegetic sound are sounds that exist in the world of the play. Things like birds chirping in the background. Diegetic sounds are sounds that the actors cannot hear and that are not a part of the world of the play. Sound is to make something bigger. Well, to amplify anything is to make it bigger. In this case, it's to make the sound louder. That is useful in theater because a lot of times the actors are having to fill a very large space with their voices. Sometimes they need electronic amplification in order to do this successfully, and over the top of other sounds that might be run through an electronic system and therefore louder than their voices. Here are some examples that can help us understand the difference between diegetic and non-diegetic sounds. Diegetic sounds are sounds that belong to the world of the film or the world of the play. The dialogue that happens between characters in the play is a diegetic sound. Sound effects like birds chirping, which we presume is happening in the world of the play and the actors can hear that sound. Ambient sounds like a car going by or a knock on the door. These are all sounds that the actors hear and respond to, and that is what makes them diegetic. Non-diegetic sounds are sounds that do not happen on screen or sounds that do not happen in the world of the play. Sounds the actors can't hear. If there is a narration or voiceover in a film, that's a great example of non-diegetic sound. The actors don't respond to it. They don't act as though they can hear it. It doesn't affect what happens in the world of the play. Additional music or background music is definitely one of those things that is non-diegetic because the actors, again, don't respond to it, don't hear it. It's something that just the audience is privy to. What then, you might ask, am I actually doing about lights and sound for this project? For Theater 1 through 4, Musical Theater, and English, you're going to write a paragraph that tells your plan to use color, direction, and intensity to ensure visibility, focus the audience's attention on what's important, and create the desired mood for the scene. You should use the words color, direction, and intensity in your paragraph. So here's an example paragraph. This might be like what you would actually turn in for lighting for your project. My scene is set on Juliet's balcony at night. The mood is romantic and exciting because it's Romeo and Juliet's first chance to meet and express their love. Since it's nighttime, I would use a blue wash to keep most of the stage dark. but I would add some yellows focused on the balcony and the wishing well in my set to focus the audience attention there, and follow spots on Romeo and Juliet so we can see them clearly. The light on the wishing well should look like a beam of moonlight. The follow spots should have a medium intensity so we can clearly see facial expressions, but so there will be a soft glow effect. So here's why I wrote what I wrote. I went back to my original notes and questions about how we should think about and talk about lights and sound when we're designing for a scene. The first couple questions were like, what is the setting, time and place? How can we use lights to portray that setting? What's the mood of the scene? How can I support that mood with the lighting, right? And I want to focus on how I can use visibility, focus, and mood. So if I go back to my paragraph, I'm using this as a checklist to see, okay, have I done that? My first two sentences talk about the setting of the scene and the mood of the scene and identify clearly what they are. So describing the setting. So when you write your paragraph, take a few minutes to describe that setting and identify that setting clearly. Then I talked about what lights I would use, I imagined, and then talked about what lights I would use to show that time and place. I'm going to use a blue wash. Blue lights tend to be darker than any of the other colors, and that will help keep the stage mostly dark so that it seems like it's nighttime. Then I talked about how I would use lights to focus the audience's attention. I talked about using yellow lights that were focused and aimed on the balcony specifically and the wishing well. The wishing well, of course, as a symbol of their budding love and the wish and the hope that that love brings. The balcony, because that's where all the action is happening. And then finally, as I went through my checklist, I realized that I hadn't talked about how these lights would help create that romantic mood specifically. So I came in here at the end and I added a sentence about that glow. I mentioned that I wanted it to have a soft glow, but I didn't explain clearly what the purpose of that glow was. So I added a sentence here to explain that purpose. The soft glow will help frame the characters romantically because it makes everything seem dreamlike. So again, how have the lights created the mood? So if I go back to my checklist of questions, have I answered all of them? Have I hit all of the details I need to hit? Yes, I have, so I am done. For sound design for Theater 1 through 4, musical theater, and English classes, we are simply going to be writing a paragraph about what our sound design would be if we actually created it. So that paragraph is going to tell your plan to use diegetic and non-diegetic sounds and amplification to ensure your actors are heard, communicate the setting, and establish the mood. So those are the 3 things that I have to do. That's my checklist. Here is an example sound design paragraph. My scene is set at nighttime on Juliet's balcony. It is the first time Romeo and Juliet get to meet and express their love for each other. I will use diegetic sound effects of nighttime outdoor sounds like frogs and crickets to help establish the setting and make it clear that it's nighttime. I would want that sound effect to fade down at the beginning of Romeo's line, but keep going quietly under their lines. I would put body mics on Romeo and Juliet so they could worry less about projection and more about inflection and tone. Toward the end of the scene, I would fade in some romantic music that could be diegetic, a street performer who helps transition from this scene to the next, or non-diegetic background music that will swell after the last line. So back to our checklist, we're looking to say how we can use sound to communicate the setting. We're also looking to ensure that the sound allows for audibility, that the important things that need to be heard are heard, and for mood. So I start this paragraph the same way that I did my lighting paragraph, by describing the actual setting itself so that that is clear for the reader before I begin the rest of my work. Then the next couple sentences I use to talk about how I can use sound to communicate the setting. I've decided that I'm going to use sound effects in the background of nighttime outdoor sounds like frogs and crickets, things that would naturally be in that scene if they were actually out on Juliet's balcony. All right. Those frogs and crickets and those nighttime sounds also contribute to the mood to some extent, although I didn't really say that super clearly, but it would and could definitely contribute to that kind of romantic mood, because a lot of times we associate romance with nighttime, date nights, outdoorsy, right, quiet, secluded spots. Like, that makes sense. They go well together. The next thing I want to do is make sure that I have talked about how I'm going to provide audibility, how I'm going to make sure that everything's heard. So for me, I decided that I was going to mic the actors. And that was not only to ensure their audibility so the audience can hear every word, because the words in Shakespeare are super important, but then it's also about allowing them a little bit more freedom when it comes to the inflection and the tone. If they're not having to worry all the time about projection, they have a little bit more flexibility and freedom with those other aspects, variable elements of their voices. And then finally, I talk in the end here about how I can use some non-diegetic sound to add to the mood in the setting. I'm going to fade in some kind of background music. Now, this background music could be an actor who comes on stage as a musician, and he's both there as a part of the scene. Maybe he's walking on the street outside of Juliet's house and they hear him. Or it could just be background music that comes in that is non-diegetic. The audience gets it, but the rest of the characters on stage don't hear it, quote unquote, right?